I had been wandering the forest for hours, seeking some shade and a bit of peace. The afternoon sun was getting warmer and I needed a break. As I stepped carefully through the underbrush, trying not to make any noise, I stumbled upon something that stopped me in my tracks. It was the unmistakable sound of voices. But not just any voices, these were huge, resonant voices like the rumble of thunder after a storm. I crouched low, my curiosity piqued. There was no mistaking it, two giantesses were having a conversation. I had heard of these creatures before, massive, towering women with feet the size of houses and voices that could shake the ground, but I had never been this close to one. Or rather two. I peeked through the thick foliage, careful not to be seen, and there they were. The two giantesses sat comfortably on large rocks in the middle of a forest clearing, their enormous figures dwarfed everything around them. One of them had short, curly red hair that cascaded down her back, and the other had long, dark brunette hair. They both wore simple, weathered tunics that barely covered their massive limbs. Their faces were radiant and full of joy as they laughed together, their voices carrying with a lightness that filled the forest. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. These creatures, so much larger than I could ever imagine, were acting like two ordinary friends sharing a meal. They sat, their enormous hands casually breaking off pieces of something from large baskets they had beside them. My heart raced as I realized that this was their lunch. I had no idea what they were eating, but the size of the portions gave me a clue. One of the baskets was nearly as big as a house. My attention snapped back to the two women as they began talking about the meal they had earlier. "Gerda, you won't believe the human I had for lunch yesterday," the red-haired one, Hilda, I thought she was called, said, her voice filled with amusement. "He was small, like really small. But boy did he taste good." As I reached down to scoop him up, I could feel his tiny body in my hand. His skin, so soft and delicate. I felt a small flutter of excitement, almost like a rush of adrenaline. The moment I held him, I knew he was meant to be my meal. There was no hesitation. It was the kind of hunger that wasn't just physical, it was deep, almost primal, as if my body had been waiting for him to be in my grasp. Gerda, the blonde giantess, laughed heartily. "Small, huh? Those are always interesting. Tell me, Hilda, what was he like? Squirmy? Soft?" "Oh, he was soft, all right. In fact, he was tender, like a roast you'd slow cook all day. His skin was tender, almost like fabric, but with a little more resistance. I could feel his small form sliding over my tongue, smooth and warm, as if he were a delicate piece of fruit. His scent was already blending with the taste of him, sweet and earthy, like a good apple with a touch of honey. I let him sit on my tongue for a moment, just feeling the way his body shifted with each tiny movement he made. He wriggled a bit at first, but it didn't bother me. There's something calming about the way a tiny human moves when they know they're completely at your mercy. His little arms pressed against my tongue, and I could feel every inch of his body. His skin was soft, but it had this faint elasticity, like a well-worn leather jacket, that made me want to savor him even more. At first, I thought he might be too squirmy, you know? The tiny ones always wriggle, but this one, he barely moved once I picked him up. Like he knew he was meant for me. Gerda snorted in amusement. "I swear, you make it sound like you're picking out a piece of fruit at the market. But I get it. Go on, tell me more." I nearly choked on my own breath. Did she just compare a human to a piece of fruit? The casualness with which they spoke about eating people made my mind spin. My heart beat faster, not just from fear, but from something else too. I couldn't stop myself from listening intently. "He was warm when I first grabbed him," Hilda continued, clearly in a nostalgic daze. You know how some humans are cold, like they've been out in the wilderness for too long? Not this one. He was warm, soft like a pillow. It wasn't like the cold, lifeless humans I'd eaten before. He had this gentle warmth radiating from him, like a freshly baked loaf of bread or a cup of hot tea. It made my fingers tingle as I held him there for a moment, just appreciating the softness of him. His legs twitched slightly, probably out of fear or desperation, but I didn't mind. His little arms were kicking and flailing, but he barely put up a fight. Then, I closed my mouth around him, feeling the immediate warmth of his body against my teeth. I didn't bite, oh no, there was no need for that. I just gently let the pressure of my mouth guide him down into my throat. The sensation of swallowing a human whole is something that can't be rushed. It's almost like a gentle pull, a soft tug of gravity, drawing him downward, and I could feel him shifting as he went. His body slid down my throat, soft and smooth, but also with just the right amount of resistance, as though my body was coaxing him down, making room for him. And when I swallowed him, she paused for dramatic effect, and I leaned forward, trying to catch every word. When he went down my throat, he just slid right down. No hiccups. I could feel him wriggling for just a moment, but then plop. Gone. Into my belly. Once he passed into my stomach, that's when the real magic happened. My stomach muscles contracted slightly, as if acknowledging his presence. There was this brief moment where I could feel him inside me, a warm, squirming little bundle that was now mine, completely. I let out a soft sigh of contentment as I felt him settle down. I loved the way they curled up in there, fitting perfectly into the space that had been waiting for them. It wasn't a painful fullness, not at all. It was a satisfied kind of fullness, a deep, warm sensation that spread through my body. The thing I love the most is how they fade away once they're inside. The little wriggling movements stop and I feel them calm down, surrendering to my body. The digestion process is slow, almost like a dance between me and my meal. It's so soothing. I can feel the warmth of him being absorbed, slowly broken down, turning into this nourishing, comforting sensation. It's like I'm at peace finally with my hunger sated. But what makes it truly special isn't just the feeling of satisfaction, it's the sense of connection. I know that he's become a part of me now, that he's inside me literally. And for just a moment, there's this calm knowing that we're one. No longer separate. I'm not just eating him for the sake of filling my stomach, I'm absorbing him. Every tiny part of him that breaks down inside me contributes to this deep, satisfying contentment. It's not about rushing to finish. It's about the experience. The texture of his skin against my tongue, the way his tiny body felt inside my mouth, the way he settled in my stomach, warm and full of life, before being absorbed by my body. Everything about it is perfect from start to finish. And when it's over, when the last of him has faded away into me, I sit back and relax, feeling the soft, contented rumble in my belly. I always get a little emotional at that point, almost like I've finished something sacred. It's not just eating. It's a process. A beautiful, slow, satisfying process that I never get tired of. I felt a strange sensation creep over me as I imagined what that must have been like. The way she described swallowing a human, with no more effort than a sip of water, it was surreal. Gerda, clearly intrigued, urged her friend on. Tell me about the flavor. How did he taste? Was he spicy? Sweet? Savory? Hilda's voice took on a thoughtful tone as she considered the question. He was definitely savory, but not too much. He had a kind of sweetness to him, though. You know that feeling when you bite into something and it's got that perfect balance? That's how he was. He wasn't too salty, not too bland. But what I loved the most, he had this crispness to him. Like the first bite into a perfectly baked apple. You know how you feel that snap when you bite through it? That was his skin. Not tough, but with just the right amount of resistance before it gave way. Gerda's eyes gleamed with interest. Oh, that sounds delicious. And I bet he wasn't too crunchy, was he? I laughed at that, shaking my head. No, thank the stars. I've had a few that were a bit too crunchy, and that's not the kind of texture I'm looking for. This one was smooth. His skin felt like fabric, but it had just enough of a snap to it, you know? When I first sank my teeth in, very gently, of course, I could feel the faintest bit of resistance, but then he gave way, and it was perfect. It felt like I was biting into something that was meant to be eaten. His little legs wriggled a bit, but honestly, I barely noticed after the first few seconds. It was like he surrendered completely. Sounds like you were made for each other, Hilda. You and that little human were perfectly in sync. Oh, I love that snap, Gerda said, clearly getting excited. What about inside him? Was he chewy? Mushy? Not at all, Hilda answered, her voice almost dreamily content. He was soft, but not in a squishy way. It's like he was made to be eaten, Gerda. As soon as he hit my stomach, I could feel him settle down, all warm and snug. There's something about the way they curl up inside you, isn't there? You feel the little shift, that slight squeeze, and then you know you're done. You're satisfied. I swallowed hard as I tried to make sense of what I was hearing. These women weren't talking about food the way I did, they weren't discussing dinner. They were describing meals in the most casual manner imaginable. Okay, but seriously, Gerda said, clearly trying to pull the conversation back to the important details. How full did he make you feel? You know, after all that chewing and swallowing and settling down. Was it a good kind of full? Or one of those overstuffed kinds? Hilda let out a soft laugh, and I could hear her stretch out as if lounging on a soft bed. Oh, it was perfect. You know that feeling when you've eaten just enough, and your belly's all warm, and you don't feel hungry at all anymore? That's the best part. It's like my whole body goes and I get this wave of warmth. I felt full, but not in a way that was uncomfortable. Just right. Like my stomach was a soft cushion, and everything inside me was melting away into pure satisfaction. I was content, Gerda. Just content. I was so engrossed in the conversation that I almost forgot where I was. I could feel my chest tightening, an odd mix of awe, fear, and strangely curiosity. I had to know more about how this all felt. These giants weren't just consuming meals, they were enjoying them, savoring them like fine wine. It was all so intimate. So what happened after? Gerda asked, clearly intrigued. Did you feel him moving around, or did he just settle? Hilda replied, that's the magic part. After he stopped squirming, I just felt him there. A little warm bundle nestled inside me. It's like a little reminder of the life I took, you know? I can feel them there, just lingering in my belly. And then, slowly it all fades. I feel them break down and mix with everything else. It's the most relaxing feeling. I shook my head in disbelief. It was as if they were talking about some sort of ritual, a peaceful, calm experience. The thought of a human being slowly absorbed into a giantess's stomach felt surreal, and yet they spoke of it so casually, so contentedly. Well, that sounds lovely, Gerda said, a playful tone creeping back into her voice. Next time you'll have to share. I might just join you for lunch. If I get hungry, that is. Hilda chuckled, and I could practically feel her grin. You're always welcome, Gerda. But don't take too many. It's nice to enjoy them slowly, you know? Each one is special in its own way. I stayed hidden behind the rock, still stunned by the conversation I had just overheard. These giants didn't just eat humans. They savored them like a fine meal, appreciating the subtle differences between one human and the next. It wasn't about hunger, it was about the experience. I took a deep breath, realizing how close I had come to being one of their meals. My heart was still racing, but now I understood something new about the giants and their strange, casual way of life. Their world was vastly different from mine, and yet, in that moment, I couldn't help but feel an odd sense of connection to them. I slowly backed away from the clearing, keeping my head low and my steps light. There was no need to rush. I had learned something new today. And who knows? Maybe one day I'd encounter these giants again. But for now, I was content to remain a tiny speck in their enormous world.